Welcome to Chinwag Tuesdays, your passport to a world of language and culture.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Chinwag Tuesdays. I'm Amanda and today's special guest is Shiloh, a fellow ESL teacher from New Zealand living in Portugal. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh, no worries. Hi everyone.
All right, so how about you start off with a bit of a self-introduction. Where in New Zealand are you from and how did you end up in Portugal?
I'm from Auckland originally, and I grew up there, and then I went traveling as you do after university and just kind of never came back, I guess. Yeah. I lived in Australia for a few years. I met my husband there. We moved to France for a few years, and now we're living in Portugal.
Wow, and is your husband Australian or Portuguese?
He's Portuguese.
Okay, I just assumed because you said you ended up in Portugal, so
yeah, eventually,
yeah. Wow, it's so interesting because a few weeks ago I spoke to another Aussie English teacher and she lives in Spain, and she kind of said the same thing as you. After she finished school, she just wanted to travel and she kind of never came back.
Yeah, it happens, right? What about you? Have you done a similar thing, or have you been home?
Kind of. I mean, I live in India now. My husband's Indian, so I guess that's similar between us. We actually met here in India. I came here for a holiday and met while I was on vacation. And I moved here about 5 years ago, but I didn't really travel outside of Australia after school, but I traveled a lot inside Australia. So I spent a year living at Ayers Rock Resort and working at Ayers Rock Resort. Then I spent a couple of years in Darwin, lived in Brisbane for 6 years, and this was all just traveling for my work, basically. And then I moved to India. So,
oh, that's great. A lot of us don't travel enough in our country, so that's really cool that you did that.
yes, yeah, definitely. It's so hard though. I don't know about New Zealand. I've been there a couple of times, but I don't really know about living there. But in Australia, it's just so expensive to travel around the country. That's why so many people choose to travel to neighboring countries, especially in Asia, because it's so much cheaper.
Yeah, it's stupid, isn't it? Yeah, that's why a lot of Kiwis like go to Australia and the islands. It's pretty much the same price. So why would, when you can go somewhere else?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. It's so hard, especially when you definitely want to see, your own backyard in a way, but
yeah.
It's just it just costs so much money. And Australia is huge. It takes like 6 hours almost to fly from Brisbane to Perth, or you could just fly a couple of hours and get to Bali.
I know. Yeah, totally. Australia is huge. Every time I'm flying over, I'm like, oh my God, we're still in Australia.
Yeah.
We're still in Australia.
You spent some time in Brisbane, didn't you?
Yeah, I lived there for 7 years, actually. Yeah.
That's amazing. When were you living there? What years?
Oh God, I was, let's think, what am I now? 45. I would have been when I was, 28. So about 15 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's changed a lot.
Has it?
Yeah. So they closed the casino and they've opened up this whole new wharf area with a brand new casino and all this kind of like this big dining and like gambling precinct basically right on the water and the wharf area. I haven't seen that yet because that just opened like within the last month. But I'm going back home at the end of next month for a couple of months, so I'll go and check it out.
Are you actually from Brisbane?
I was born in Sydney, and then I grew up in a very tiny town about 4 hours south of Brisbane. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Coffs Harbour, home of the big banana.
Yes, of course. I've been there for camping and the beach.
Oh, yes, exactly. So I'm actually from a tiny town a little bit north of Coffs called Bulgulga, or Whoopi for short. So beautiful for camping and beaches.
Yeah.
Yes, so that's where I grew up. So we moved there when I was about 8, and then I moved to Ayers Rock when I was 19. So I basically grew up there. I went to TAFE there, and then I traveled around and ended up in Brisbane.
Oh, awesome. What a great place to grow up in. It's so beautiful, Coffs Harbour.
I know. Oh, and where I live in India, I can sort of get I can get everything that I got in Brisbane basically, but I'm just missing the beach. There's no beaches close to me. My husband and I went for a trip to South India at the start of the year, and it took us 2 flights to get to the beach.
Wow, that's insane.
So
Oh
yeah,
my
I definitely
God.
miss the beach a lot.
I bet you do. Oh my God. Yeah. I'm in Portugal. I'm right by the beach. Like it's,
Oh,
yeah.
amazing. That must be a pretty big change from New Zealand. Like I've been to Auckland and they've got the black beach there, but I can imagine that Portugal's
Yes.
beaches are probably a bit nicer.
Oh yeah, Auckland beaches are not the best for sure. No, but yeah, oh no, I love it here. Yeah, there's so many. You're surrounded by beaches, golden sand. It's
Amazing.
I can't complain. I can't complain.
All right. Well, the hot topic, the question that I get asked a lot, well, actually, I get asked the difference between New Zealand English and Australian English. The main one I can think of is the vowel sounds, but then people sort of ask, what are the main differences? So how does New Zealand English differ from Aussie English in terms of pronunciation and vocab?
Well, you yourself know, but I guess we could talk about it together. Like you said,
Yes.
the vowels are a huge thing, and I think that's how people can recognize the difference between us. So English speakers, native English speakers, will be able to tell the difference because, for example, I'll say, I'm going to put rubbish in the bin, and you say
Bin with an E.
and I
You
say
use
his
a
name is
schwa
Ben.
for that, don't you? Like bin.
Yeah, bin. It sounds very lazy. Bin.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we don't want to pronounce it properly.
It's almost an Aussie trait being a bit lazy while speaking. Yeah. Okay, so that's the main one is the I and E.
Yes, and I thought of another one. You guys say dance, eh? We say dance, like the British English.
Yes, so that's actually mixed. So I say dance, but then some Australians say dance. Like I did an interview I assumed it was just people in Adelaide because there's a little pocket there of people who still have a kind of British accent because Adelaide, South Australia was the only state that didn't have convicts. Anyway, but
really,
I did an interview. Yeah, so they're a bit proud about that. So I interviewed an Australian who lives in the UK. She teaches Italian, actually. So she's of Italian heritage. And I interviewed her and she was talking about the movie, The Castle. So I say castle and she says castle.
Oh.
So I think it's very mixed.
Okay. I had no idea. All the Australians I know while I was in Brisbane and Sydney a lot always said dance.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
okay,
So
I didn't know. Interesting.
I think, I'm pretty sure most of the East Coast do say dance, to be honest. But yeah, there's some people that do say dance, but I don't know if I've even heard anyone say it. I just know that it happens occasionally.
Okay. Oh, wow. Didn't know. And then, of course, there's loads of vocab and slang that is different, right? Like you guys seem to like putting O's on the end of words sometimes. Like you go servo, bolo, things like that. And I didn't even know what a servo was. I had to ask my friend. She's like, I'm going to the servo. I was like, what's that? Service station, gas station. Okay. Yeah. I mean, good, because you shorten the word. So it's less to say, but it's sometimes hard to know. It's hard to know what you mean. And then we have different words, right? Like in New Zealand, we have jandals.
Yes.
Right.
And we say thongs.
Yeah. Which, can be mistaken for something else as well.
I actually just saw a friend of mine on the weekend and we were talking about slang. She's Indian. And I think I was actually mentioning how I was interviewing you and I was really excited to interview a Kiwi teacher. And I actually had said about, thongs and how you guys call it jandals. And she said that she remembers the first time I had said thongs and she thought I was talking about, the G-string.
Underwear.
But she was so kind of like shy about it. She didn't like bring it up. And I don't know when she realized I meant the things on my feet.
Oh, yeah. I guess when you just meet someone too, like you're a bit embarrassed, like, oh, okay, you're going to go get your songs. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's funny.
Jandals. That's a good one though. Jandals.
Yeah. We say chili bin. You guys say esky, right?
Yes, true.
Yeah. So those sort of things. Oh, and one thing that really confused me, and I never I always had to ask because I found out this could just be my friends. I don't know if it's an
Hmm.
Australian thing or not, but they would always say, "Oh, I'm going to go watch the football. I'm going to go watch the footy." But
Mm.
the footy could be Aussie rules. It could be rugby. It could be rugby league. It could be soccer or football. Like I always said, what are you watching?
Yeah,
Like in
true.
New Zealand, we
Yes.
sort of say rugby, or we're going to go watch the league, or we're going to go watch the soccer, or well, it's becoming more football
Okay.
now.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of depends on where you are though. So if like Victoria, Western Australia, South Australia, their main, code of football is AFL. So when they say footy, you can almost guarantee that they're referring to AFL. But then New South Wales and Queensland, their footy is most of the time league. But then, then you've got league and union. I think union, they might actually just say rugby. But if you're someone that doesn't really know football and you hear rugby, you don't know if it's league or union. And then you hear footy, which, oh, God, yeah, it's just so confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, those are the main things that I can think of. And of course, in New
Yeah.
Zealand, we say kia ora for hello a lot. Kia ora,
Yes.
the Maori language we use a bit, and it's becoming more and more prevalent in New Zealand now.
Yes, I have heard that actually. And is there a national language in New Zealand? Is it Maori? Is that official or?
Yeah, I think it's become, I mean, I don't know if it's done, but I think it's become official because they're teaching it more in schools and
Yeah.
like this generation now are speaking so much more Maori. It's amazing. And you see it in like letters, people sign off in Maori or greet in Maori and like official letters
Yeah.
now. It's
Yeah.
great. It's becoming like
Yeah.
another language, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
That's something I really appreciate about New Zealand actually is how they embrace the Indigenous culture. Australia's still got a long way to go. It's getting better,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of resistance. I don't know if the same thing happened in NZ, but there's a lot of resistance from people when it comes to, changing things back to the Indigenous names. Like I think Fraser Island recently went back to its Indigenous name, Kagari. I think I pronounced that right.
Oh.
And so many people complained. Like, oh, it's always been Fraser Island, just keep it.
They don't like change. They don't like change.
No, they don't. So there has been resistance to that sort of stuff, unfortunately. But I really do like how New Zealand kind of has embraced it. I think a little bit better than Australia has anyway.
Yeah, I think it helped having Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister. She really pushed for it in schools and everything. So that kind of helped.
Yeah, definitely. Now, there's one vowel sound that we didn't talk about, which is the E and E. So I remember watching a video. It was a comedy. It's a comedy account on Instagram. And the joke was saying something about, and it's a Kiwi group. They had to take their dog to the vet. So instead of vet, they say vet.
Yes.
So I think that for me, that's the main way I can tell if someone's from New Zealand, because even it's hard for me if I'm watching something sometimes, like my husband will say, oh, are they Aussie? And I'm like, I have to really listen because I have to listen to the vowel sound.
Yes.
And
totally.
then I'm like, okay, no, they're Kiwi. I can tell because they say
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, if you don't have strong accents, right? It takes a while to be able to pick them up. There are some, some Aussies and Kiwis have really strong accents, but some it's quite soft, so it takes a bit longer.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, I had a time with actually another teacher. I worked with a lot of Irish colleagues, and I remember we were talking about my class visiting her class one day for my class to ask her some questions. My students were a little bit older than hers. And anyway, so I wanted them to talk about immigration. So I'm like, okay, so they're going to come in, they're going to have a few questions about immigration, about sex. And she was like, Shiloh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with your students coming in to talk about that. I mean, my students are quite a bit younger. And I was like, what? It's like, well, it's not that bad. I mean, it would come in about 6. She's like, oh, Shiloh, I think we need to speak with our boss to see if it would be okay. I'm not comfortable. And I'm like really confused, thinking it's just some basic questions. And then anyway, in the end, I said, well, it's only about immigration. And we were going to come in at 6. And she's like, at 6. Oh, clock. And I was like, yeah, what did you think I did?
Oh, Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I can imagine that would have caused a lot of confusion.
Yes, and it went on for ages. We were both looking
Yeah.
at each other, very confused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I actually had a situation similar to that, not with vowels, but with the R here. So
Ah,
in Indian English, they have the rolled R. So they would say for the number 4, they say four and roll the R. And
okay.
my husband, his accent's changing actually a little bit. So he doesn't have a really strong R anymore because of me. But then his sister was over one day, I think it was his birthday. And I was like shouting to him, and I'm like, what do you want for dinner? I think I was just going to order something, or maybe it was lunch. Anyway, I was ordering food. And I'm like, what do you want? And then I asked his sister, what would you like? And she was like, a burger. And I was like, a what? She's like, burger. And I honestly had no idea. And like, we were just looking at each other like confused. She's like saying it again and again. And I'm like, I've never had this before. Is that an Indian dish? My husband's in the bedroom. She said burger.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It sounds very different though.
Yeah, because of just the really strong burger. And then I was like, oh yeah, okay, that totally, I can understand that now. But at that second, we were just looking at each other like, why are you not understanding?
Yeah. Oh God. Luckily your husband was there. Imagine you'd be like, could you draw it, please?
Yeah. Put into translate for me.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, that happens quite a bit. Do you speak Portuguese?
A little, yeah. I wish I
Yeah.
spoke better, but unfortunately, yeah, I get by.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
I'm learning Hindi because my husband's parents don't speak English, and I can get by well enough with my level of Hindi, but I want to be better.
Yeah, have a good in-depth conversation. It takes a while, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah,
Yeah,
not to sound
exactly.
like, a child when you're speaking. Right?
Yes.
Making
Yeah, I
those
sound like a
simple mistakes.
robot. Yeah.
Yeah. Takes a while.
'Cause
Takes a while, guys, to learn a language. We totally feel for you.
yes, exactly. Oh,
We know what
see,
it's
I don't
like.
know
We
if
know
they
what
really, yeah,
it's
I don't know if they really do connected speech in Hindi, but I definitely pronounce everything like spoken like this, like in syllables. And and I'm like, I'm really just, and I listen to how my husband speaks, and he's able to connect things. And anyway, it's just like, I want to get to that level where I'm not sounding like a robot. Progress.
Yeah, exactly. Takes time. It takes time.
It does. All right. So, what are some common misconceptions or assumptions do you think foreigners have about New Zealand culture?
Well, I guess one of the things, I guess there's two extremes. So
Mm-hmm.
one is that because we're so far away and we're a little country, that we're not really that well educated, or we don't have access to things like
Yeah.
you do in Western countries. But of course we do. And I guess a lot of them kind of think that we're like Australia. So just because we're close to you. So they think that we're as hot as Australia, that we have lots of dangerous animals.
Yeah.
And in fact, we don't, like in New Zealand, I don't think we have any dangerous animals. And it's actually not that hot.
No, it's not. I made that mistake when I went to New Zealand. I went in November and I assumed that it was going to be warm. And I did not pack for the weather because I had just spent a week in Fiji before New Zealand. And I remember getting into Auckland being like, what the hell is this? I thought it was going to be like, I thought it was going to be hot. Anyway, yes, I definitely made that mistake.
Yeah, and then often people just don't know anything about New Zealand. Like they've heard of it, but they don't really know anything about it. They don't know anything about, Maoris and the Maori culture.
Yeah.
Or anything really, or I'm the only Kiwi they've met, so they think that all Kiwis are like me, but they're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it's more that I get, and it's no surprise we're so far away. We're a little country. It's normal that people in Europe or in the US don't necessarily know a lot about New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. New Zealand, I only found this out like a couple of months ago. I just created an online course in Australian English and I was doing some research for it. And during that research, I found out that when there was all the British colonies, New Zealand was actually part of New South Wales for like 50 years.
Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
know that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, eh?
Yeah. And then New Zealand actually got asked if they wanted to be a part of the Federation of Australia. And I just think, imagine if that happened. Imagine if they said yes and New Zealand was just another state.
Yeah, just a little bit further off
Yeah.
than
So both
Tasmania.
Fiji and New Zealand actually were asked, and both Fiji and New Zealand said no. But sometimes I think about how crazy that would be if they were just different states so far away.
Yeah, like really far. That's weird.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay, so you've already told the story about your Irish colleagues mispronouncing six and sex. So any
Yes.
other misunderstandings because of pronunciations?
Hard to think of them off the top of my head now. To be honest, we're always
Yeah.
kind of misunderstanding each other because you said something quickly, or
True.
so it's kind of a two-way thing. Sometimes I don't understand them as well. Sometimes, again, that same vowel sound like pin and pen. So I'll say, oh, do you have a
Yeah.
pen? And I'll think that I want a pin. Does that,
Mhm.
can you, yeah, something that you stick in rather
Oh, the
than
pin
something
kind of,
write
yeah.
with. Yeah. So those sorts of things, really. Yeah.
Mhm.
What about you with Australia?
Look, here in India, it's just the R sound really, because it's just so different. It's a complete opposite. Like Australian English and New Zealand English, they're both non-rhotic, so we don't say the R's most of the time. Indian English, they say the R, but it's rolled. So there's that. Also, I find that Indians, if it's not my friend or my family or my husband and his sister, I have to speak with an Indian English accent. So I find myself putting extra stress on T's and D's, and like my THs, instead of being in between the teeth, they're behind my teeth. Like when I say thank you, I say thank you, and really kind of push the TH sound. Numbers, especially like when I'm reading out like my number or something, I'm like 8. I'm stressing that T instead of 8. Yeah, so I find I'm adapting. I have to speak with an Indian English accent, and it's mostly because of I always refer to Ford because that's the main one. My number has 2 4s in it. So I'm like, Ford.
Oh,
Yeah.
good practice.
Yeah, it is. It does help actually, because otherwise, if I don't do that, the R's, it's a bit hard otherwise, because, we don't really say R's.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. Yeah, you have to pronounce them here in Portuguese too. And there's 2 types of 1 R and 2 R's, and they both have different sounds, but I just say them the same. I can't distinguish the sound. I just try to pronounce the R as strongly as I can. Yeah, it's similar thing.
Yeah. Yeah, actually there's 2. I think there's 2 here. They have an R and then they have like RH kind of, and same thing, I pronounce it the same because I just can't do it differently. One's like one, the tongue starts back and kind of comes forward. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for us native English speakers.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. And when you lived in Australia for how long? 7 years, was it?
7 years. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have any culture shocks living in Australia? Like obviously Australia and New Zealand, they are basically cousins or siblings, you could say. They're very similar in things. So did you have any culture shocks?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you go in and it's going to be, the culture is pretty much similar to New Zealand culture. You guys love being outdoors like we do, and we all speak English, of course, and all those sorts of things. You know that it's going to be hot, and that you've heard of all the animals, but of course I was living in Brisbane near the city, so I kind of thought, I won't see that many animals, or insects. But actually you just can't escape them in Australia. So for example, and the way you use them as well. So for example, like the cockroaches fly, which I had never seen coming from New Zealand.
Do they not fly there? I thought all cockroaches flew.
I had never seen flying cockroaches before.
Oh, they're
Remember
disgusting.
Yeah, and I just was shocked when they started to fly. And my students were just totally shocked and like disgusted that cockroaches could fly, like, and they're big, like weird. And in Brisbane you have those big birds, the ibises, they're massive.
Oh yes.
And
so
they sit
I don't know if they called them this. Yeah. I don't know if they called them this when you lived there. I think this is a more recent name, but they have a new nickname now. They're called bin chickens.
Oh yeah, bin chickens. Yeah. Yes.
Did they call them that when you were there?
Yes.
Oh
my
disgusting.
God, big. And like they all sit in the tree, and it's almost like the tree is being weighed down by the weight of the birds. They're so big. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird. And on Australia Day, at our school, we would have cane toad races. So we would paint numbers on the cane toads, and our students would bet on the first one that would go out of the circle. And then, awful thing, when we'd finish with them to kill them because they're really poisonous, we would freeze them in the freezer so they die.
Oh, I have heard that to kill cane toads, but I don't know if schools would still do this in 2024, really? To be honest.
Oh, we did it every Australia Day. And then at the Story Bridge, the local pub, they do cockroach races. So it's a similar thing. They do a big circle outside of the pub. Like it's a pub where you eat and drink, right? Yeah. But it's outside, in the outside area. They would draw a big circle and they'd have all the cockroaches. And then it was the first cockroach that like got out of the circle that won. I don't even I can't remember how you could tell which one. Yeah. Anyway, I just remember being quite like, wow, this is crazy.
Yeah. Oh my God, I've never heard of those before.
Really? Oh my God. That's all I knew in Brisbane. Every year they did it.
Wow. I'll have to ask some friends who are from Brisbane because, I mean, it might just be because I'm not from Brisbane and I never really heard about these things.
Okay. Yeah, I remember being shocked. And then one of the most freakiest times was when, I personally hate spiders. Yeah. And I remember at our apartment block, it had this pool that we could all share. And one morning I went out to go jump in the pool. I get out there, guys, and I see the pool with about, I don't know, it looked like about 10 big, black, hairy spiders crawling in the water. They were like in the water, moving.
Having a little swim.
Oh my God. I couldn't go into that pool for a very long time after.
Oh, I bet. Oh, that's so disgusting.
Guys, Australia.
When I lived out in the middle of the desert, we had an issue in the summer with bugs, beetles. And I worked in this hotel that was called Sails in the Desert because it was like just covered in all these different sails. But our roof of the reception was made from like clear perspex. And in summer, you would think it was raining because you'd hear it tut, 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 tut on the roof. And it was bugs falling on the roof. And you would look up and there was just like these black, kind of blotches everywhere. And then there was a problem with, what are those furry little caterpillars called? Not centipedes?
Centipedes with all the legs.
Yes, the furry ones. And I woke up to one in my bed. It was just, living out there just really opened your eyes to a lot of creepy crawlies, that's for sure.
Oh, bro. Yeah,
my gosh.
Australia, guys, Australia.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so you don't have any of these things in New Zealand?
None. No snakes in the garden. Like one time I had my little baby, at home, and I saw there was this big green snake climbing up in the garden, massive thing, climbing up the tree in the shared apartment garden, very small garden. Yeah. So I went upstairs to the owner and I was like, oh, excuse me, I just want to let you know I saw this big green snake in the garden. I'm a bit nervous because my little baby, my toddler, is he runs around. And he was like, oh, yeah, I already saw it. It's only a green snake, it's not poisonous. It might hurt you if it bites, but that's it. And I was like, thanks.
Oh my gosh, honestly, that response does not surprise me at all.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, okay. We won't be going near the
Oh
garden.
my gosh.
Yeah. So definitely the animals and insects. I mean, I knew,
Okay.
you hear of it, but
Yeah.
living in sort of near a city, you wouldn't think you'd see that many. But
Yeah.
I did encounter quite a few things.
Yes.
And also in Brisbane, it's very hot and humid. So it's a very humid type of heat. And so in the afternoons, you'll get that downpour, won't you, around 4 p.m. It'll just pour for like, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour to cool everything down. But I liked that. It was nice because, you can enjoy jumping out in the rain and having a bit of yeah. But I mean, I loved Australia. It's such a great country. I don't want to scare people off. It is really an amazing country. Beautiful, beautiful. Parts are so different, aren't they? And people are quite different too, depending on where you go. So yeah, it's an amazing country to visit for sure.
Yeah. This is going to be a really silly question, but there's no kangaroos in New Zealand, right?
There's wallabies in the South Island.
You've got wallabies. Okay.
Yeah, which I had never known. I thought we had nothing. And then I don't know, a few years ago, someone said, no, actually we have wallabies, the small kangaroos, in the South Island.
Right. Okay, there you go. So it wasn't such a silly question.
No, but that's it. We don't have, anything else.
Yeah.
Koalas
not
or
one of those typical kind of,
What
What are the native animals of New Zealand? You've the kiwi bird, right?
Yes.
And
just birds. Yeah. We just have birds like the tui.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And there's another one, pukeko, the pukeko.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've heard of that one.
Quite a pretty bird. Yeah, pukeko, the tui. Yeah, just lots of birds, really. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sorry, we're not that exciting compared to Australia. You can find so many weird and wonderful animals in Australia. It's insane.
True. Yes. Yep, that is very true, actually.
Yeah, we don't compare for that. If you're an animal lover, go to Australia for sure.
Yeah, but New Zealand, I think, makes up for it with its scenery. Like the landscapes are just unmatched in New Zealand. Like I've driven, as I said, I've kind of traveled around a lot, but I drove everywhere. So I drove from Woolgoolga to Ayers Rock and then I flew back from Ayers Rock back to my hometown. Then I drove from Woolgoolga to Darwin. That Stuart Highway in the middle of the Northern Territory, it's just like hundreds of kilometers of straight road with nothing to see. At least in New Zealand, you've got beautiful sceneries.
Yeah, I guess that's the good thing about having quite a bit of rain. Everything's green. But yeah, I mean, and especially the South Island, lots of people rave about this. You have Queenstown and all the area around there.
Yeah.
The and all that sort of stuff. Milford Sound. So yeah, I mean, it is really beautiful. But I mean, Australia is still incredible. You guys have Western Australia and all that. I've never actually been. I mean, that looks amazing.
Yeah.
So I guess it's just different, right? Which is a good thing.
True. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I've been to New Zealand twice. The first time, it was actually my very first overseas trip when I was 19. But then I went again, in 2016. I started off in Queenstown. We drove from Queenstown to Christchurch. We were supposed to get the ferry from Christchurch across to Wellington, and an earthquake hit.
No.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the really big Christchurch earthquake. It was the one a few years later, but it was the one that took out the ferry from the Wellington ferry that goes down to the South Island. I forget the name of that port. Yeah. So that took that road completely out in the ferry. So then flew from Christchurch to Wellington. Then there was like a second earthquake.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And you know what? When we were in Christchurch, it felt really eerie. Like I can't even explain it. The street was like a ghost town. There was no one walking at night. There are so many memorials because of the first earthquake, right? And it just felt really weird. It was like this really weird atmosphere. And then that night the earthquake happened. So I feel like I was, that was the kind of feeling we got. And then after that, we just flew from Wellington back to Auckland, rented another car, drove down to, is it Taupo or Taupo?
Oh, Taupo, yeah.
Yeah. And then kind of just traveled a bit of that. But one thing I do love about New Zealand is the fact that it is so small that you can drive from the bottom of the North Islands to the top in like a day.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, it's easy to get around the, well, there's narrow roads and stuff, but yeah, you can definitely do it for sure. Yeah, compared to Australia. Oh my God.
I know, you'd be driving still in Queensland.
I know. Oh God. Yeah, true.
Yeah. Did you get to go back to New Zealand often?
No, not often. I have 3 kids, so it's pretty expensive to go back and forth.
Bet.
But I went back a couple of years ago, just briefly to Auckland. I was like, yeah, it's February. It's going to be amazing weather. I'm going to go from winter in Portugal, which isn't that cold really, to New Zealand. But oh my God, the weather was terrible. Yeah, February, it was terrible. But I guess even though in Europe people are generally very friendly, I just find every time I go home, I don't know, there's something about Kiwis. There's just always smiling and always seem happy. And every time I get home, I'm just like, oh my gosh, people are so friendly. Like, woman would come up to me, saw me with my kid, bring me with a big pack of chips and be like, oh, take these for your child.
Oh, sweet.
You go to the pools or something and someone's got time left on their locker or on their park and they give you the card so you can have it so it doesn't get wasted.
Yeah. Nice.
Just people, I don't know. I'm always, I shouldn't be because I'm a Kiwi, but I'm always kind of shocked by how friendly people are.
Yeah, I think when you're away from a place for long enough, you kind of forget just because you're not in there, you're not surrounded by it all the time.
That's it. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, it could just be me, but yeah, I'm always like blown away by how friendly Kiwis are in general, I'm sure not everybody is in general.
Yeah. I think like when I went back to Australia for the first time after moving to India, I think it'd been around 3.5 years. And it was just nice to be able to think and speak and communicate in English because it's just so hard. I'm sure you probably feel the same way in Portugal. Like when you're around like a different language, it's really your brain, you just get fried from like thinking all the time. It's just like nice to kind of let go and go, oh, thank God.
Totally. And your personality changes a bit. You try not to let it. But I'm usually such an outgoing person that wants to talk all the time and make jokes, But when it's that second language, it's very different. Jokes are what come later, you've really got to understand the language well to be able to make good jokes and understand good jokes. And so, it was like my son had a birthday party yesterday to go to, and I said to my husband, please can you go, because trying to stand around for 4 hours talking to native Portuguese mothers, it's just it's hard. I can do 1 hour or something,
that's a lot.
It's hard to make a lot of conversation, whereas if we were in Australia or New Zealand, it's like, oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah, definitely. I actually got invited to a friend's wedding at the start of the year here in India, and it was in a completely different state, and her family, basically all the guests at the wedding spoke Hindi. Really, no one spoke English. And by the end of the 4 days, I was like, oh my God.
You must have been exhausted.
I was, and like, I mean, it was great. It was a great experience, but because I hadn't really been away from my city for so long, like hadn't really traveled around India too much. I remember being at the airports at different, like the layover airports and stuff like that. And just out of habit, I was speaking Hindi because that's what I do here. And then people were really shocked at the same time. And for me, I'm like, oh, it's normal now. But everyone's like, wow, you speak Hindi. Like,
yeah, because I mean, I guess a lot of foreigners don't, right? I
No,
suppose.
no, they
They go, oh,
wouldn't.
it's too
Yeah.
hard. I'm not going to try. Whereas good
Yeah.
on you, that's awesome.
Oh, yes. But it is really exhausting. So I do feel for my students, the ones that, if they're speaking English all day, like one of the questions I ask new students is,
Yeah,
what's your day to day like? Like, what language do you speak? And they're like, oh, I speak English, at work and whatnot. And then I have to speak my language when I get home. And I'm like, I completely understand
totally.
that.
Yeah, me too. I totally get it. And especially when you've traveled a bit and you're trying, like when we moved to France, I had to learn French
Mhm.
from zero. So I put in so much
Yeah.
effort and I really got to learn French well. But then
Yeah.
we moved to Portugal and I was like, oh my God, another language. And it's tiring. Like it's
Yeah.
amazing. It's an amazing experience and opportunity.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do understand people. It's tiring. And like when you're trying to
Yeah.
live your life, it's
Yeah.
got to put in that extra
Yeah.
time, but it's hard. It is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. And what you were saying before, I really resonated with about the humor and how you are normally an outgoing person. Like, I think we both are by the sounds of this interview,
Yeah.
but I'm normally a very outgoing person. I'm loud. I do swear a little bit in English, but in like Hindi, I have this whole different persona. Like, I'm very smiley and like I speak very slow,
Yeah.
but I'm just like a completely different person than you hear me speaking Aussie English. I'm like, what are you doing? Kind of thing. But yeah, the humor is one that really gets to me, that I don't really get Indian humor. And sometimes I feel really homesick for Australian humor. So I've started watching more like Australian English comedy shows or movies or like YouTube
Right.
videos and accounts and stuff like that, just to kind of keep that humor.
Oh, did you watch that film they made in Brisbane? I can't remember what it's called now. The boy, it's about a boy who grows up in
Oh,
Brisbane and becomes a journalist.
Boy Swallows Universe. Is it that one?
Yes. Oh my God, I so enjoyed
Yes.
watching that, hearing the Aussie
Yeah.
accent, seeing a bit of
Yeah.
Brisbane. Oh my God, that was just
Yeah.
ah
Um,
memories.
one movie, I don't know if you have it. I think I'm pretty sure I watched it on Netflix with a VPN for Australia, but it's called
Yeah.
Australia Day and it's based in
Oh,
Brisbane. It's an old movie, but it just got released on Netflix and it's three different storylines that are all kind of interconnected. So it's like an Indigenous woman, there's like a Muslim family, and then there's like a Chinese illegal immigrant. And all of their stories are kind of intertwined. But it was really interesting. It was a
that
really
sounds
interesting movie. I
amazing.
really enjoyed it. Yeah. So it's just called Australia Day. And yeah, it was filmed in Brisbane and it's like modern kind of Brisbane. So it was, I don't know, it's just kind of nice to watch it. And I know these places.
Yeah, that's it. I live there. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So
cool.
I do recommend that movie.
I will check it out. I will check it out.
All right. So what is one big lesson that you've learnt from comparing New Zealand and Australian English that could help others?
I would say, and I guess it's not just Australian and New Zealand English, but any language that you're trying to learn or listen for nuances. I try, instead of focusing on the word that you don't understand, pay attention to the context that it's in and the tone, the inflection that they're making. And you can often work out what they're saying, even if you don't know what the word
Mhm.
means. And if you really don't know, just ask the person, because sometimes you can't work it out, no matter how
Yeah.
hard. And that generally we can understand each other. But yeah, there are some words that are different. And it's important to respect that. I think it's great that we have different words and different pronunciation. And we love ribbing each other, the Aussies and the Kiwis. And
True. Yes,
yeah,
very
and that's
much.
part of the fun, it's all in fun. So
Mhm.
yeah. What about
Yeah.
you?
I really like that, actually, that advice about looking at the context rather than just the word. But yes, I think same thing is that you have English as a language, but then you've got all the different dialects. And I think respecting the fact that people are going to say things differently or have different vocabulary or different words. And it doesn't mean that one is better than the other at all. It just means it's different, and different is okay. And I see it a lot on social media, actually, where, people might be, saying bad things about a certain accent, especially like within British English, because there's like 50 British accents or something. They might say that, this accent is what happens in Australia with Australian English, the bogans, like the the broad accent, sorry.
Bogans.
You know, people will like say, oh, you know, that's a bogan or whatever. Just because something's different doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean they're uneducated, doesn't mean, you know, it's a bad thing. It's just different. And I think to respect that is really important.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally
cool.
agree.
All right, Shiloh. Well, it has been so lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.